It's 7 minutes past 8 o'clock. 8 men were released without charge after being arrested in Jersey in connection with alleged child sex abuse. They were aged between 17 and 20. They were arrested in June of last year on charges of grooming and engaging in underage sexual intercourse. 12 alleged victims were identified by the police, but because none of the girls would give evidence against the men, none of the men were charged. The Home Affairs Minister is Senator Ian Lamocon, and Senator Lamocon is with me in the studio this morning.
Yes, hello, good morning.
Once again, it would seem that Jersey is failing its young people.
Actually, we have a much better system than we had 10 years ago. There were very serious issues of the inability of the system then to safeguard youngsters. I was talking yesterday to one of your colleagues to cases I was aware of then, 2 cases involving girls who were about 15 or 16 who were drug addicts and who were living with drug dealers then, and it was clearly sex for drugs. Actually, we have a much better system now. It's improved even further since last summer with the introduction of the MASH system, Multi-Agency Safeguarding Hub, so the information is shared between agencies. But you're never going to have a system which is going to totally safeguard vulnerable young girls.
Nonetheless, Minister, I suppose what I'm really asking as a concerned parent, and many will be listening this morning, are young people in the island still at risk? Because these girls wouldn't give evidence. The men have walked away, haven't they, from this?
Yes, but I think it's not just these young men. I think the risk element arises in a number of different ways. It arises in this kind of case with vulnerable young girls who are perhaps flattered by the attention of young men who actually don't understand that they are victims, that they're being used, and there's a whole lot of issues here. There's issues of education, there's issues of getting youngsters to understand what is going on here, that they're being manipulated. But the story of young men plying young girls with drink in order to make them more compliant for whatever they want to then do with them is as old as history, is it not?
But it's still nonetheless sexual grooming and not something we want to see in our society.
It's sexual grooming, yes, it is. I think where there's been a big change of attitude in relation to this whole area is that perhaps 20 years ago people would have said, the girls, they're tarty or whatever.
They asked for it.
And therefore would put some blame onto them. Now I think it's understood they're vulnerable and they're victims, and the responsibility doesn't rest with them. The responsibility rests with the people of full age, the people who are older.
If a man has sex with an underage girl, it's sex abuse. Even if she consents.
It's a criminal offence, of course. It's and if they're under 13, it's particularly serious. But even under 16, it is child abuse. That's the point. Even if it's voluntary on the part of the girls, and I think that's been psychologically a change of approach.
What can you do as a minister with your fellow council of ministers, and indeed with MASH, this multi-agency approach, to stop young women being so vulnerable?
Well, I think it's information. It's information-based, and actually this particular story, which was back in last summer, is a success story because it's the agencies working together to identify their issues, then to seek to do something about them.
But is it really a success story? Because ultimately nobody was prosecuted, and the only way to stop this is to show that you, as an authority, are going to crack down on people who break the law.
You can't prosecute people if you've got no witnesses. And as you know, Matthew, the test in relation to criminal matters is a high test beyond reasonable doubt. It's a success story because it was identified that this kind of activity was potentially going on, and there was intervention to prevent it. So although criminal prosecution would be very nice in relation to offenders, the key thing is protecting young people.
Do you think young people are better protected now, 6 months on?
I think the MASH has come in since then. But I say the system is now very, very much better than it was 10 years ago. But
you haven't really answered my question, though, Minister. Do you think younger people are better protected now than they were 6 months ago?
Yes,
because of this case?
Because of the MASH system, yes.
Right, so you've got a multi-agency approach. What more can be done? I know this is an ongoing issue.
Well, I think there are educational issues as well, actually working into schools so that actually young people will understand when they are being manipulated, when they are being used. Because I don't know the details of the case, but it suggests that the girls didn't want to make a complaint. I assume they were girls, but they didn't want to make a complaint at the end of the day. So in some way, they thought they were getting something out of this.
Yes, we again assume they're girls, but of course the age of consent for homosexual activity is also 16. So again, if it's underage activity with men against men, it's still not acceptable.
It would be the same, yes.
So what can we as a community do? Do we need to be more vigilant? Do we need to be more mindful of educating our children?
I think that parents do need to be much more conscious of where the youngsters are, who they're associating with, and things of that nature. I mean, I actually went to a very interesting presentation some months ago in relation to major issues of grooming, gangs, and so on, the problems associated with that, and the reasons why the girls very often won't talk, sometimes they're frightened, whatever. But a key issue is always parents, those knowing what's going on, because actually children don't live alone. They live within families, they live within communities.
No, I know no child is immune from these potential problems, and every child could be groomed in any sense, I suppose, if they find themselves alone with the wrong kind of people.
Well, exactly. I mean, I had 2 daughters, I have 3 granddaughters. I think I knew where my daughters were and who they were with. And that's a key issue. Now, the girls may be lying, of course, but responsible parents need to know what's going on here.
That said, I got home last night, picked up my copy of the Jersey Evening Post, and it's a shocking story. They've used the Freedom of Information Act to put this into the public domain, and now we're talking about it this morning. It did give me the opportunity to share that story with my 15-year-old daughter and
yes,
to highlight with her. So I suppose there is some good to come out of this.
Oh, yes, I think that's quite important, that people actually understand. Sometimes there's an attitude of, oh, but this is Jersey. Well, I'm sorry, things happen in Jersey. We have serious social issues within our communities, and if you'd asked me the question, am I surprised by this? The answer is no, I'm not.
Shocked?
No.
Saddened?
Saddened, but as I've seen much worse in the past.
So what more can we as a community do then?
I think it's awareness. Ultimately, it is quite difficult to totally protect youngsters. I mean, you get a situation sometimes where young people, because they're not listening to their parents, because they put themselves at risk, end up in children's homes. They then sometimes run away and end up back in the sort of situation that we're talking about now. There's the ability to place them in greenfields for a time for their own protection. So all those sort of systems exist. But if they're ultimately self-destructive and not listening to people, then it's actually quite difficult.
Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. The Minister for Home Affairs, Senator Ian Lamont, on there, discussing an investigation by the police in Jersey into an allegation of sexual grooming. The police identified 12 potential victims and 8 young men were arrested, but later released without charge. The victims were unwilling to give evidence.